Remember, you can get in touch with our Fearsome Foursome by emailing clubdubpodcast@mail.com and through Twitter, using the hashtag @clubdubpodcast.
Welcome to the
Club Dub Football Podcast,
where the only question is,
does your team make it into the club?
Can he get in? No, he cannot!
Hi, my name is Rob Rose, and welcome to another episode of the Club Dub Football Podcast. This week, inspired by the bravery and phenomenal announcement from Las Vegas Raider Carl Nassib, we look into the annals of NFL history to talk about key NFL firsts. More so than that, we're going to track those key moments that were the starting points and the initial first steps into true NFL fandom, and hope that you enjoy the ride. So, with so much to get to, let's throw over to JB, PB and Aldrin and get on with our show. Hi, gents.
Hi, Rob.
So another week has passed by, which means the four of us get together and hang out and talk about all the big NFL news of the week, whatever else we think is worthy of conversation. And this week, we have to kick off with the massive news that Carl Nassib, the Vegas Raider, has become the first openly gay player in the professional ranks of the NFL. An announcement that feels both momentous and yet somehow melancholy. I'm not sure if I necessarily need athletes to feel that they need to announce, nor that they need to hide this kind of news. But I think if this allows more people to be open, if we are going to see fans continue to respond in the way that they have been thus far in such an accepting nature, I think it could be the start of something truly momentous and wonderful ahead for the league, and hopefully other sports as well. I mean, we do this podcast from the UK, where currently, if we were to look at our own English version of football, in the 4 pro divisions of soccer, we don't have an openly gay player at all in those divisions. And let's just hope there is a movement that begins here, a momentum that gathers that means people are just able to live life the way they choose without any fear of recrimination. And with all the things we've had in the NFL around race and now this, that feels like it could be the start of something more positive, we are utterly inspired on the Club Dub Football Podcast because we are making the theme of this episode NFL firsts. So before we share our favourite firsts from ultimately our favourite sporting league, Phil, I hand over to you because I have no doubt you're ready with a splendid quiz of the week.
Welcome to Phil's Quiz of the Week.
Love that, Rob. What a profound intro to the podcast this week. So, another Phil's Quiz of the Week this week. 10 questions based around NFL firsts, as that's the theme of the podcast. So, NFL firsts. I'll read all 10 questions through and then we'll run through answers at the end. So if you're playing along at home, let us know on Instagram, on Twitter, via email, how you did. Right. Question number 1. Who was the first quarterback to pass for 4,000 yards? Who was the first quarterback to pass for 4,000 yards? Question 2, along a similar line. Who was the first player to rush for 2,000 yards in a season?
I mean, the good thing is I did extensive preparation for this podcast, deciding what theme I was going to pick on. And fortunately, a lot of these answers cropped up.
They get more difficult, don't worry. Question number 3. What was the first regular season game to be played outside the United States of America? What was the first regular season game to be played outside the United States of America?
On that one, can we get a bonus point for the stadium?
No.
No
Right.
bonus point for the Azteca.
But, I was going to be impressed.
Ruined it.
Guess we all know you got the answer right to that one. Question 4. Again, along a similar line. What was the first regular season game to be played outside North America? The first regular season game to be played outside North America. Question number 5. I said they get a bit more difficult. When was the first 800-point weekend in NFL history? Just the month and year is fine. Halfway through, you're ready for the next one? I'm seeing some nods on our online video conferencing service, so I'll carry on. Number 6. In what year was the 30-second play clock first used? That's question 6. In what year was the 30-second play clock first used in the NFL? Question number 7. When was the first time the Super Bowl was won on the final play of the game?
Oh, what a question that
You
is.
can give me the year, which Super Bowl it was, whatever you want.
Can I also tell you who scored the point? Or points?
Well, if you know it, I'll be impressed that you can feel 3. I've got it written down, so...
So give me the question again. The first time the Super Bowl was won on the final play of the game.
Correct. The first time the Super Bowl was won on the final play of the game. Question number 8. Who were the first wildcard team to win the Super Bowl? Question 8. The first wildcard team to win the Super Bowl. Question number 9. Who was the first team to score on a safety in the Super Bowl? The first ever safety in the Super Bowl. Which team was it? And then question number 10. On the 14th of October 2001, who caught the first ever touchdown pass thrown by Tom Brady? So on the 14th of October 2001, who caught the first ever touchdown pass thrown by Tom Brady? That rounds off all 10 questions from our quiz of the week.
I am confident in 1, 2, 3. None of my answers here.
Really?
Yes.
I was struggling a bit, but I think I'm about half marks. Some of them, 30-second play clock. No idea.
Yeah, I've got about halfway.
I've got answers scribbled on an old envelope.
So number 1, who was the first quarterback to pass for 4,000 yards in a season?
Joe Namath.
Yeah, Joe Namath.
Joe Namath. Anyone know the year?
Ooh.
Nah, I do remember that.
Late 60s.
Yep.
69.
No.
I had 67 in mind, but it'll probably be 68. 67 for the Jets. Cool.
Good work, Rob.
Nice.
Motion Joe Namath. Don't know if that was his nickname, but it's now. Broadway Joe. I know that.
Yeah. Maybe the second one was his nickname.
I'm just, in his future career as a pro boxer. Number 2, who was the first player to rush for 2,000 yards in a season?
OJ.
Got to be OJ Simpson, hasn't it?
OJ Simpson of the Buffalo Bills in...
Stop asking for years. You're not giving out bonus points. You're very clear.
Impress the listeners.
73.
Oh, 73. Spot on.
Yeah.
2 for 2 on the Club Dub podcast. Number 3, what was the first regular season game to be played outside the United States?
I'm going to leave this to other people. I sport this enough.
It was the 49ers versus the Arizona Cardinals, and it was in the Azteca Stadium in Mexico.
Correct.
It still holds the highest attendance, doesn't it, for an NFL game?
Something crazy like 100 and some odd thousand, wasn't it? 120 odd thousand.
Yeah. Anyone know when it was?
Early 2000. I was.
I know, but it's
I'd say early 2000s.
2nd of October 2005.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyone tell me the score?
31-14.
But did you read that?
Yeah, but it's a spoiler alert to my my selection. So I have written notes for this.
Fair enough.
31-14 is correct. So, hot on the heels of that, what was the first regular season game to be played outside North America?
Well, I can only think the first Wembley game. So
I thought Giants
Dolphins. Yeah.
Giants Dolphins. That's correct. At Wembley Stadium. Anyone hazard a guess at the date?
No.
2008. No, it was 2009, wasn't it?
28th of October 2007.
I can go and grab my ticket stub if you want.
Anyone got the score?
It was one of the Giants Super Bowl years.
13-10 to the Giants.
Classic.
Well, you say classic. Some long-standing UK NFL fans had to put up with the Broncos 49ers a couple of years later
True.
which was, I think, highlighted by a flea flicker that never was and a couple of field goals. So, yeah, it did get worse before it got better.
Right, question 5, moving on. When was the first 800-point weekend in NFL history?
Absolutely no idea.
December 2004.
No.
Stumped me. I've not got one.
It was week 12 of the 2008 NFL season, so November 2008. 837 points were scored.
Oh, God, so cleared it with a bit of room to spare then as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Look at that.
Nil point for that one then. Number 6, I'm guessing this will probably be another goose egg here. In what year was the 30-second play clock first used?
79.
79's close.
Well, my guess of 64 isn't that close then, is it?
No.
So, never mind.
Roberto, you going to bring one home?
I'll go 1980 if 79's close. I mean, I don't know.
76, 1976. I should get the family fortune sound effect, really. Anyway, I've got a key ring somewhere.
I don't think we can afford that, can we?
Number 7, when was the first time the Super Bowl was won on the final play of the game?
I think it was the Patriots versus the Rams. I can't tell you which Super Bowl it was, but it was Adam Vinatieri kicking a field goal on the last kick of the game.
That was the 2001.
It was Super Bowl 36 on the 3rd of February 2002. Adam Vinatieri kicking a 48-yard field goal as time expired to beat the St. Louis Rams. That's right.
I knew it was
You get the
Vinatieri.
point. It's a 2001 season, so you get the point.
Yes. I'm doing better than I expected.
Did you get that one wrong?
Yeah, I could remember the kick. I wouldn't have been able to. I'd have had to work out the year the same as everyone else, I think, rolling back.
So question number 8. Who were the first wildcard team to win the Super Bowl?
I think the Raiders. Are you going Steelers, JB?
Yeah.
I missed a Steelers team.
Aldrin?
I didn't have one for this.
I thought
I was too busy trying to remember Adam Vinatieri and what game it was.
I thought it was the Raiders. I could be wrong.
No guess from Aldrin? Jim? No?
I would only go for one of those.
Oakland Raiders beat the Philadelphia Eagles 27-10 in Super Bowl 15.
Yeah, the 81 Raiders.
1981.
Yeah.
There you go, Rob.
Back on track.
Who was the first team to score on a safety in the Super Bowl?
I have also said the Steelers.
I have no clue. I mean, obviously, I love the Denver Broncos Seahawks game safety just for its bizarreness, but I couldn't think of an obvious other one. I'm sure there are.
Yeah, that's what I had, just because I couldn't remember an earlier one.
I'm pretty sure the Steelers got a safety in the Super Bowl where they beat the Vikings, but whether that was the first one, I don't know.
Yeah, I couldn't.
The first team to score on a safety in the Super Bowl was defensive end Cliff Averill on the first play from scrimmage in Super Bowl 48 for the Seattle Seahawks.
Look at that. I'm doing better than I thought.
Yeah, nice. Okay.
You look like you're questioning it, JB.
No? Why would you say that?
I'd just like to point out, if you are Googling, these stats came from the Pro Football Hall of Fame website.
That's kind of removed the mystique of Quiz of the Week, to be fair, Phil. But you just read from a screen.
Although this last question isn't. So, 14th of October 2001, who caught the first ever touchdown pass thrown by Tom Brady?
Know this, I think.
I don't.
I wrote the only Patriot I would be reasonably confident was there at the time in Troy Brown.
No.
Terry Glenn?
It was Terry Glenn, wide receiver Terry Glenn. You know, why has that suddenly come into the news, Terry Glenn and the first touchdown pass by Brady? So Glenn celebrated and then threw the ball 6 rows up into the stands. And the lucky recipient of that ball kept it in a bank safe deposit box for the best part of the last 20 years. He recently put it up for auction and it sold for $428,842.
So, Phil, if only a player had worn one of the many mini helmets that I can currently see behind you. If only Tom Brady's head was small enough to fit into a 4.5-inch helmet.
If only.
Phil, could you just read question 9 again for me?
I think there's a flag on the players. James throwing his challenge flag.
I'm throwing a challenge flag.
I'll read the question.
Is this going to be Phil's last quiz as Quiz of the Week?
Who was the first team to score on a safety in the Super Bowl?
So the first score of the game between the Minnesota Vikings and the Pittsburgh Steelers, Tarkenton quickly,
Makes great podcast.
The first score of the game occurred 2 plays later when halfback Dave Osborne fumbled a pitch from Tarkenton at the 10 and the ball rode backwards and across the goal line. Tarkenton quickly drove on the ball in the end zone to prevent a Steeler touchdown, but he was downed by Dwight White for a safety, giving Pittsburgh a 2-0 lead.
Do you know what? Actually,
I'm afraid, JB, we can only accept the answer on the card. And
no, that's
was
I
Cliff
haven't
Average,
got.
yeah.
As listeners of the podcast will know from my antics within quizzes, I'm absolutely fine with us going with the answer that's on the card. I just want everybody to understand that I was absolutely correct, actually.
You know what? I think there was misleading information. Safety.
Blames his tools. Blames his websites.
There was a safety in Super Bowl 9. In fact, do you know what?
That is the one.
Yeah.
Right. What a shambles of a quiz.
Wow.
So hang on a minute.
Can't even read off a screen.
It was the fastest ever score in a Super Bowl with just 12 seconds. Let's pretend that was the question. We'll recut that.
Okay.
Question number 9. What was the fastest ever scoring play?
Phil, I'm not editing it in.
I got 4.
Just try and speak, Phil. I'll just talk over you. I'm not buying a mini metro.
I got 4.
2, 3.
5 for me after that vicious challenge at the end. Otherwise, it would have been 6.
Oh, in that case, I got 5.
What was question 7? I didn't know question 7, did I? Was that the most points in a week?
That was Patriots.
That was the.
Oh no, I did then.
Yeah.
Sorry for the high voice there. I'll cut that out.
How many did you get?
6.
James?
5.
Aldrin?
5 for me.
Rob's the winner again then.
Well done, Rob.
Is that Terry Glenn? Terry Glenn making all the difference.
Terry Glenn makes all the difference.
Thanks for listening. That was Phil's Quiz of the Week.
Nice work. And the Cardinals coming up as the Mexico City game is another good one. If you want one for next week, Phil, the highest attendance ever at Cardinals Stadium, please. Do you know this?
No.
It's a little over 100,000. Do you need more information?
Yes.
It was One Direction when they performed there on their North American tour about 6 years ago. Yeah, sad, but true.
Wow.
There you go. Rise up, Red Sea. So, Phil, it's a stellar quiz of the week with one notable exception. But at least it allowed JB to feel upset and aggrieved, which I think is where he often does his best work. So it all worked out fine in the end. But on the subject of NFL First, if anyone has got one left that has not just been trampled by Quiz of the Week and already mentioned in reasonable amounts of detail, we should make this happen. So Aldrin, you know the drill. I'm coming to you first. When it comes to firsts in the NFL, talk us through your favourite, please.
Well, I mean, obviously I've already given the game away, haven't I? But yeah, my one is the 49ers versus Arizona Cardinals at the Azteca Stadium in Mexico City in October the 2nd, 2005. Not only for the incredible spectacle that it put on, and obviously the Cardinals won, so a happy day for Rob as well. But just for what that has meant, I guess, for us as a group, a friendship group, and yeah, just obviously the podcast in general, really, because it paved the way for international games, for regular season rather than just, you know, one-off spectacle games. And I think that has inevitably led us more towards what has kind of felt for the last couple of years, in that we may have an NFL franchise over here at some point. And I think that is an incredibly exciting prospect. So really, I'm going to lean on you here a bit, Rob, for the game itself, because although I remember it in fits and spurts, I just remember it was a phenomenally packed stadium and an incredible game. But yeah, I think more symbolic for us really as to how it's paved the way for international games that we can enjoy over here in London, and potentially in the next couple of years over in Germany. Yeah, I think it's incredible that we we've come from 2005, having one international game outside of, America, the United States, to now where we have regularly 3 or 4 a year in kind of normal times. And I think between us 4 bemoan the fact that there's only, 2 or 3 or 4 that we get to go and see. But the fact that, a mere 15 years ago, there wasn't any, the fact that we've now got 4 regular games and what is feeling like a regular fixture of a team over here in the Jacksonville Jaguars, I just think's incredible, really. I think it's, it's paved the way for, us going to games and all sorts. So, yeah.
So I'm gonna chime in first, I think, because I think this ties in quite a bit with what I was going to say. So I think I'm going to give mine because they're quite similar, and then we can talk about the whole thing. Because my favourite NFL first was September the 28th, 2014, when we saw the Dolphins play at Wembley as a group for the first time. I'll say hi to Joel, because he was there with us as well, if by any chance he's listening. But it was kind of the first opportunity that I think the 4 of us really got to spend time in kind of the atmosphere, kind of the experience of an NFL game. It was my second, because I'd been with Rob and Aldrin to see the Steelers and the Vikings the year before. It was the first time Phil had come along with us. And I think it was that kind of the genesis kind of what has eventually led to this podcast, just having a great time watching football. And I think Aldrin's right. You have to trace it back to that 49ers Cardinals game as the point that it kind of like, okay, this is a sport that can work outside of America. And we've seen it with like other international games they've done, not necessarily having the greatest of success everywhere they've gone. I know sort of the Bills used to play a game in Canada every season, which kind of knocked that on the head because it wasn't proving quite as popular. But with the games in Wembley, you've seen they're looking at moving into Germany now. Played a couple of games again back in Mexico the last couple of seasons, and all of it just shows how much growth and how much development there still is in the sport. That's what we're entering, what are like over 50 Super Bowls, over 100 years now. So it's incredible. Like, we got to see Def Leppard. What could possibly be better than that?
I think the progression into Germany is a point well made by you both. I mean, if we think back to Wembley games, and I've been going quite a while now, to see the fans that are attracted to the spectacle, the event at Wembley initially, and, you can include Twickenham and the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, I suppose, but seeing the fact that it's not just English fans, you get people travelling from Scotland, a fair old trek to come down from Scotland. You see people from France, from Germany, you see all sorts of people. And it shows what an incredible demand there is around the world for a league that ultimately is based on 32 teams. This is a relatively compact, relatively self-contained league that we watch. But at its very best, I don't think I've ever found anything as exciting to watch or enjoy as the NFL. And I think Germany, for as much as, we might selfishly think a German game might limit the chances of the true multiple fixtures coming back to London anytime soon, I think the more this game spreads and the greater momentum that can be built, the more chance there is of, Aldrin led with this, a franchise here one day would be something I would absolutely love. And again, you go back to what came before. So whether you think of they really were just showcase occasions. When you go back to people like the 49ers and Dolphins and Broncos, even coming in, from memory, I want to say the 80s or maybe into the early 90s, they came and did pre-season games that weren't even pre-season games. Ultimately, Joe Montana would take a snap, Dan Marino would take a snap, and then off they go to the sidelines for the rest of the game. It felt very much staged and very much, very much a spectacle, but not a contest, I guess is probably the way I would describe it. And I remember, not necessarily ever imagining it would go beyond that. And then being a fan of NFL Europe and then NFL Europa and the World League iterations and different things, I think it showed that there was an appetite, if not one that could be, ultimately sustained, when you looked at the cash model. But I think now to imagine that what we may have within our lifetimes, and I know that probably sounds a bit defeatist, but in the next decade or two, if this could really expand into a truly world game, I think that would just be one of the most exciting things to enjoy and to follow. And one of the true joys of being an NFL fan is to be there in a stadium and cheer on your team. And, for as much as I've loved the Wembley games, and I have, some of my favorite memories of my entire life, my love for the NFL is always stoked and excited by these fixtures every year. I've also been really fortunate to go to the US and watch games, watch the Cardinals play. I was fortunate enough to go and watch the Eagles play in Philadelphia, and seeing what that's like, seeing how home fans create an atmosphere, create an event again, or almost all of its own, with a unique feel and flavor to it. I really do now believe strongly, and have done for the last few years, that the UK could sustain a franchise. I think, if I'm honest, maybe the last year and a half and the types of restrictions placed on sporting events in general, let alone truly international sporting events, might put that back a few years. But wouldn't it be an amazing thing? Like I say, the Jaguars are a gift. Let's hope that that's something that only grows and grows. But yeah, I've absolutely loved it. And you're right to kind of call it out as the really the first spark that leads to us all these years later doing a podcast once a week.
Yeah, that's what I think. And I think that first NFL game outside, and by NFL game, I mean like a regular season game, not just a preseason or what have you. But the fact that was the first game, was so well attended, built that kind of buzz and atmosphere. And like you said, JB, that showed that it could work outside of the US, kind of set it on the path. And I think we're now at a point, I think I really hope that the Jacksonville Jaguars do well. I'm not a Jags fan per se, but I'd certainly like to see them do well. And that mean that, they have a more permanent fan base over here that encourages, the franchise to move. From a selfish point of view, I'd love to have a franchise over here and get to see, maybe 8 or 9 games or however many might be over here. So
I love the progression as well of what we get to watch on TV. The exposure it now has here. I remember being a fan a little before you guys, in the 80s very much as a child, but in the late 90s, and the only real TV you had live game experience was Sunday night football, Monday night football, very late night, kind of Channel 4 and then Channel 5 coverage, which was great and was a treat. But to think now we can sit down on a Sunday at 5 or 6 o'clock, depending on where we are time-wise, and watch the football we can. I remember growing up a Cardinals fan and sitting watching the Channel 4 magazine show on a Sunday for what might be 30 to 90 seconds of highlights and a voiceover, describing the score and the key plays. And to think where we are now, I think is phenomenal. And the other thing, I think broadcasters like Channel 4, Channel 5, Sky Sports, ultimately deserve an awful lot of credit for how they've presented that product and helped build its popularity. I remember watching Sky Sports a number of years ago where they were kind of having this debate, could the UK truly support a franchise? And one of the points I think that was made at the time is, would the UK support a franchise when so many people already support so many different teams? There are so many different associations and fan bases in the UK. And I remember the point being made about, I think it was made about the Carolina Panthers. And they said, before the Carolina Panthers were in Carolina, do you really think fans weren't walking around with jerseys on? Fans had their associations and their teams. But you put a great team in that environment, and without quoting everyone's second favorite Kevin Costner film, they build it, they come, and I think I am still as confident as I've ever been, as excited as I've ever been, and as passionate as I've ever been in presenting the argument that UK fans are as good as any fans in the world, and we would absolutely make that a success, I've no doubt.
I think to me, the fan summary and the fan enjoyment kind of can be summarized by Phil's experience when we went and watched the Bucks and the Panthers. Like, I went to see my team, the Steelers, as I said, in 2013. It was week 4 or week 5, and that was week 4 or week 5 of my experience with the NFL. I didn't really know an awful lot. I didn't really know the rules. I didn't really know anything. It was cool to be there, but it wasn't the experience for me then that it would be for me now. I think, giving kind of the listeners a peek behind the curtain, I think all 4 of us can kind of agree when we were there watching the Bucks. I personally, I had a great time because of how happy and how excited Phil was to be able to see his team. Yes, we knew they were going to be terrible at the time, and they were. Yes, we knew Jameis Winston was going to throw a lot of interceptions. Did we know he was going to do it with the first throw of the game? No, but those are the kind of surprises you get. But for me, I remember Phil getting a picture with the guy dressed out in that ridiculous Buccaneers costume. Yeah, with his championship belt and everything. And just thinking, you know what? This is the kind of thing we miss sometimes, I think, at other sporting events that we hold in the UK. I think there is a certain cultural difference between how English or UK sports are put on and how American sports are put on. And you see that with the pomp and the circumstance of everything about it. And yeah, I think it would be interesting if they had a franchise here. What would people's leniencies go? I personally kind of believe that everybody would probably stick to the team they have, but maybe adopt the London franchise as their kind of quote unquote second team, but who knows?
Yeah, I think, any UK fan would probably say that the international series games have been great for, their own following of the NFL, but also the growth of the NFL over here as well. And more opportunities, be it podcasts or, programs, the rise of the NFL shows they've got on Sky Sports, with Sky Sports NFL, would you have ever thought of that 10 years ago before any of the international series games, so a carnival atmosphere isn't the right word, but you can probably pick out shirts of jerseys of teams, of all 32 teams, and I think, like you said, you'd never get that really in any other sport. You wouldn't go to a Arsenal versus Tottenham game or Coventry versus Leeds or something like that, and just picking 2 random teams and see all 20 other Premiership team football shirts there. It just wouldn't happen. So I think it's a bit of a spectacle. It leads to a decent atmosphere. I wouldn't say a great atmosphere. I don't think it's as great an atmosphere probably as it is at an actual home game, for any of these teams in America. But if you think by the time the fourth quarter's started, I think every single game I've been to, there's been a Mexican wave, bar maybe 1 or 2. So, but it's thrown up some great games, and it opens up, I know people that have gone to games for the first time, not really being an NFL fan, just it's a ticket, it's a bit of entertainment, we'll go and watch it, and actually grown into the game, like you said earlier. I think when we went to that, went to the game in 2014, I'd say I was a Buccaneers fan, and I'd been following the Buccaneers, and I'd watched Red Zone a little bit with you guys, but I probably didn't. I think my fandom grew from then. I was like, I'm really enjoying this game. This is great. Maybe it's something I'll stick along with, and then it's kind of grown from there.
So for me, the point you make about fans in the NFL and atmospheres in games, and again, been lucky enough to see games in the US. The weird thing about home support in a sport like American football, so with the NFL, is for these big teams and these big stadiums, there is an obvious and clear advantage. If you think about Premier League football as we'd have it here, the fact more teams win at home than do away is psychological, right? If you actually put it down to why should that actually occur? Why should that actually happen? There's no kind of logical reasoning other than the psychological impact of, fans cheering you on, encouraging you, and so on and so forth. Now, when you take the NFL, when you're at a game with a home set of fans who are quiet for their offense, loud for their defense, disruptive, and truly, like, you've only got to look at, Seattle and this whole idea about the 12th man. You've only got to look at places like Kansas City and the type of noise they generate. We are talking about truly a force that works for the advantage of the team they follow. And I think that makes the NFL, or maybe the American football dynamic, a really interesting one, because there is a an involvement and engagement. And that's something I think that if we continue to bring more fans on, educate them about the wonderful elements of this game, that for me to experience that in London, like you say, Phil, I've got nothing against a Mexican wave, but I think to truly feel something like that in London would be pretty remarkable. Just to be quick, Josh McCown, who went on to have actually a very long and I would say quite successful NFL career, was the quarterback when the Cardinals beat the 49ers. He was actually the quarterback when we beat the 49ers in the first ever regular season game at Cardinals Stadium. So he had really the two games I've described are probably his Cardinals career highlights in a sense. In the win over the 49ers in Mexico, Anquan Boldin and Larry Fitzgerald both made grabs, I seem to remember. And we had a kicker at the time, Neil Rackers, who again is probably as good a kicker as there's been in Cardinals history. The first time really, I mean, for a franchise who have historically been, I mean, remarkably poor, actually. I mean, it was the first signs, the first green shoots of success, you know, with the type of players Bolden and Fitzgerald and so on would ultimately become. And yeah, isn't it great that we are talking about competitive games, meaningful games, games that mean something in the history of their franchises, not only games that were played in other territories. And the Cardinals to this day have Spanish radio calling on their games, a big kind of Spanish-speaking fan base in and around Arizona, and then south of the border into Mexico and further beyond as well. So a great advert for how that popularity can build in places other than, you know, our four homes as a collective. And let's hope there's plenty more of it. So in terms of NFL first, Phil, JB and Aldrin have kind of both taken international series games as their point of conversation. What a cracking one it was. So PB, what have you got as your famed and important NFL first?
Yeah, for me, I think it's, you know, my first thought was probably going to be to the international series games, but then I had a bit of a, you know, another brainwave of something that probably has really helped to grow the game, you know, both in this country and worldwide, I'd imagine. You know, it certainly was my first foray. You know, if I think back to the first days of going around your house and my first kind of, as I say, foray into the NFL. And it first started 11 years ago on September the 13th, 2009. And it's led to the catchphrase at the start of every single episode that everybody loves to hear.
7 hours of commercial-free football start now.
You know, to have a program where you see every single scoring play, every single, you know, great defensive stand, every highlight of every game kind of, you know, almost as it happens, and to see that live in, you know, in your home every weekend, I think is fantastic, you know, for the casual fan who maybe doesn't have a team or, you know, yet, or just enjoys watching the sport. You know, I think it's an incredible program. The way it's presented, you know, I know it's grown from where it was, you know, Scott Hanson sitting in a small studio in front of a couple of TV screens to the CGI and effects they have on it now. But, you know, I think that's really helped to kind of bring, you know, more of the game and make it more exciting to people who maybe, you know, are new to the NFL. You know, I think it's, if you're consistently watching back to back great passing touchdowns, amazing runs, you know, real big defensive hits, you know, you think, wow, this is pretty exciting. You know, I want to watch this rather than, you know, 4 or 3 plays of 1 yard runs and then a punt, you know, like you might see in an ordinary full game. You know, as an intro to the NFL, I think it does wonders for people just to show that excitement straight off the bat. So yeah, I think for me that you know, that's a first. You know, the first time that was shown, I think, is a real big deal in terms of what it's developed into and how it's helped to grow the NFL.
Your point around Scott Hanson is a great one. I mean, for many people listening to our podcast, we're predominantly talking about people in the UK who might be, you know, familiar with not only Red Zone, but maybe things like Soccer Saturday on Sky Sports and things of that nature. And to think that, you know, you get those personalities, don't you, like Cammy, you know, and Jeff Stelling and so on and so forth over the years that have made that show so entertaining. But what that lacks is you have people talking about the goal you don't see. You know, what Scott brings is all of those elements. He has that statistical knowledge and nous that you'd expect with some of the pundits, you know, this side of the pond, but he adds that excitement, that true ability to just absolutely grab your attention in the way a Chris Kamara might do, with those calls and those unbelievable superlatives that just roll off the tongue. And do you know what? Some of the most exciting moments for me as an NFL fan have been red zone moments. And as a guy who would say, look, I have other sporting interests, there are other sports I watch and follow. But when the NFL season draws to a close, that's the only one I mourn. It's the only one I'm truly sad about, that first Sunday after the Super Bowl. But actually, as much as there's that first Sunday after the Super Bowl that always feels a bit empty, there's also the last red zone. The last red zone is a moment, whereas that week is, even though, week 17 as it typically is, there's not really everything on the line in every game and backups start here and there and all these things. There's just something about the red zone experience, which is absolutely right. And again, I kind of talked earlier about the fact that we might live through a golden age of the NFL. We might live through an age where it grows, it becomes truly global, and we get to be a tiny little part of that with our podcast and our fandom. But you know what? Can you imagine anyone doing that other than Scott Hanson? Can you imagine anyone bringing it to life the way he does? And I think he's going to be one of those presenters who whenever I should probably say, he hangs up the boots or he moves on or he moves to a different channel, or, that will be something that will never be replicated again. He's just the perfect fit for that format in a way that so rarely happens in sports broadcasting. And I think you're absolutely right. I think Red Zone is a brilliant shout.
This is the bread advert music alert, Rob, because I'm kind of in agreement with Phil about this being an important first. And what I think about what watching sport was like for me, like growing up, I wasn't the talented sportsman like my dear brother on this podcast is. I wasn't necessarily as always into it as he was, but what I always remember is Saturdays you'd sit and you'd watch a bit of grandstand with Des Lynam, and that became what sport was, and that was the figure and everything for it. And I think what you have is you have these presenters, these figureheads for whatever it is, and they're kind of what draw you in. I think you get it maybe a bit with Jess Selling. I do kind of think of Chris Kamara more when you think of Soccer Saturday, and that's not always the best thing, because what you're usually remembering is the fact that he's missed Anthony Van Den Boer being sent off or something like that. And Scott Hanson does kind of epitomise it, because again, my first experience with the NFL was that first week 1 2013 season, watching Red Zone with Scott Hanson, and it was great for a first-time fan because it's all killer and no filler. It's all of the action, everything you want to see, and when nothing's going on, don't worry about it, because here's something from another game we can show you where something matters, or here's something that we weren't able to show you earlier. Here's a fumble, here's a touchdown, here's a kick return, here's a really big moment. And I remember talking to my friend Chris and saying, who was a big NFL fan as well, we've had him in our fantasy league one year, and him kind of being, I don't think Red Zone's the right kind of thing, because it doesn't really, you don't really get to know the game. You don't really get to know the rules of it. And I kind of counter that, because Red Zone was what got me interested in the game, because it's like all of this, like almost like a big fireworks display, puff, flash, bang. You're getting all of those kind of bits in there. And because of that, that's what I then took away to be like, I need to learn more about this. So Rob will attest, like there'd be red zones where I'd just be like, what does this mean? And then 2 minutes later, what does this mean? What does this mean? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet?
It is that brilliant entry-level NFL kind of excitement builder. If you can pick it up and not know a lot about the game, but constantly see action, constantly, flip between exciting moment to exciting moment. And I think that is often one of the things that outsiders probably knock on the NFL, that it's, particularly Europeans, I guess, is that it's a bit slow and there's breaks in play all the time and this, that, and the other. Obviously, you don't have that with Red Zone. You're straight into the next piece of action. And I think certainly as you get to know the game more, you appreciate those breaks in play and kind of see how the next play is lining up and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's a great way to get into the NFL. Like you say with Scott, I think the guy is absolutely phenomenal at what he does. Like you said, Rob, there's literally nobody else that could do it. Certainly not the way he does it. With that, he brings like passion and excitement on every single play. You know, it's not, you know, I know you referenced like Soccer Saturday. It's not like that where there's, you know, clearly bias towards certain teams and they have their favourites and this, that, and the other. You know, Scott plays it from moment to moment, play to play, team to team, just wherever the action is, he's going to call it. He knows everything about that player, that team, that play call, everything. I mean, the knowledge of the guy is unreal. And that all kind of encapsulates that experience. You know, you get all of the action, all of the knowledge, all of the kind of excitement in a snippet of every single game. So yeah, I just think it's an amazing show, and it just gets you into the NFL. Like you said, Rob, it's not only the moment you mourn the NFL for the end of the season each year, but the end of the red zone kind of calendar is also a moment to mourn.
I think to kind of bring a few points together for me and maybe round this out, if you were to say to me, you can either sit and watch the Cardinals game and you can watch every play by play, or you can watch red zone. In most circumstances, I would say I'd absolutely love to watch the Cardinals game play by play. That'd be my preference. What makes it a close run thing for me is that Scott Hanson experiences it like a fan. And actually Scott is so much of the spectacle. And I was talking earlier, and Phil referenced this earlier, what a great job Sky Sports have done bringing the NFL to the UK, and Channel 4 and Channel 5 and others as well. But one of the moments you remember of the last few years is probably that moment between the Vikings and the Saints and the Minneapolis Miracle. And what you think of is Scott Hanson in that Sky Sports studio. He's on his chair, he's grabbing at people, and he's literally just the living embodiment of every NFL fan who knows what those moments mean. And what he's able to do with those broadcasting moments is remarkable. And I think we have talked about NFL firsts that have enriched our experience with international games, most definitely. But Scott, I think, is worthy of taking a bow. Absolutely, isn't he? I mean, Red Zone and that format, that partnership is just absolutely off the charts. Just a brilliant thing to behold. So, you know, hopefully one day our podcast will reach those dizzy heights. Maybe one day all of Phil's questions will be right, rather than just 9 out of 10. Maybe we'll reach the summit of quizdom on a future week. Maybe that's what's. I mean, the more I think about it, is Phil holding us back? Do you think is that something we should discuss while recording, or we should say for
WhatsApp? Scott Hanson. I mean, Scott, if you're listening.
I mean, has anyone DM'd him? I mean, it feels like he could drum up a quiz quite quickly. Oh, poor Phil. Poor Phil. Phil, do you want to have the last word on Scott Hanson, Red Zone and NFL fandom before I do my point?
No, Rob, you crack on. I think we've said as much as we need to, but we're obviously all big fans, and I think most of the guys and most of the following in the UK are as well. So long may it continue. So absolutely long may it continue. And in the talk of NFL firsts, mine is significantly different to yours, but probably just because of a certain shift in era. Now, when I was researching for this podcast and thought NFL firsts, what do I want to talk about? I was probably half second guessing you guys, you know, thinking who picks a quarterback record, perfect season with the Dolphins. You know, I was kind of thinking about what themes are likely to come up. And then I picked one that for me was really personally part of my NFL journey, because my NFL journey begins as a very young child watching Channel 4 coverage and that magazine show on a Sunday kind of afternoon stroke evening before, you know, bedtime and a school morning beckoned. And I want to talk about a name that you may not be entirely familiar with. Fred Gurka, who was a Rams running back who in 1948 took his leather football helmet home. And having previously been an art student at the University of Utah, he took out navy blue and yellowish gold paint and painted on that leather helmet the design we would now associate with the helmet of the Los Angeles Rams. In doing that, he followed in
a tradition of sorts. So if you think about the Chicago Bears helmet, that kind of famous Chicago C, there is a history of that C being on helmets of college teams and school teams from the area in the years before. But ultimately, if I think about getting into the NFL in my very early years, one of the things that really appealed to me about it was that tribal nature of it, that sporting tribal nature, but also just the brightness of it, you know, the vibrancy of it as a sport, you know, the colors, the looks, the styles. I mean, I remember in the 80s loving uniforms like the uniform of the Cincinnati Bengals. You know, you had that incredible kind of aqua of the Dolphins, the coffee against the red of you know, the San Francisco 49ers. And it just felt so unique, you know, so bright and so colorful. And if you think from Fred in 1948, every NFL team bar one has moved through iterations of logo and helmet designs. And actually this becomes slightly more relevant based on the news that Phil, you shared with us before we started recording about the NFL now allowing for alternate helmet designs in future seasons and so on, which I think will only add to that color and interest. But you think about a team and a team's identity and how it absolutely speaks to its community. You think about the Pittsburgh Steelers, you think about the black and gold, you think about cardinal red in, you know, St. Louis and then, you know, Phoenix or Arizona, whatever you want to call that shift. You think about teams like the Rams. For me, those color schemes, those helmet designs are just immediately recognizable. And from that event in 1948, within weeks, the rest of the league was starting to follow suit. The Rams were suddenly not the only teams that would have a helmet matching the color or the logo and all these things. And I just think it's a remarkable touchstone. I think it's a wonderful, unique element of the NFL. Seeing those helmets starting each play head-to-head, O-line and D-line, for me is just that image that screams football. And it's one I can't imagine the game without.
So I know we touched on it a little bit before, but Phil, I think we really should come to you first as the purveyor of all NFL helmets, as we can all see just behind you in the distance. So what have you got to say about colourful helmets?
Yeah, look, I think it'd be pretty boring if players were just wearing, you know, single colour uniforms and boring leather helmets or, you know, generic grey helmets or something like that. And I think it, you know, it adds to the spectacle of the game, doesn't it? You know, we've seen over the last few years, if I look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last year, for example, you know, the uniforms were a bit hit and miss before, you know, not the best, but then they come out with some great new uniforms that go down really well. And I think arguably have some of the best uniforms in the NFL now. Obviously, I'm biased to say that. But I think, yeah, it definitely adds something to the game, doesn't it? I think it's something that fans want to wear, you know, so it makes the stands around the ground colourful as well, because you've got your home shirt, your away shirt, your alternate shirt, your throwback shirts. You know, it really does kind of make a good spectacle for people to see. I think we mentioned, you know, when we were talking about the London games earlier, the fact that, you know, there are jerseys for all 32 teams there. And they're not, you know, you could probably pick at least 2 or 3 different types of jersey for each team as well. So, I'm definitely in favour, and I think it's a really good point of Rob to pick up on, to be honest.
I think for me, the bit you call out that most resonates is the kind of tribal nature of the kind of sporting camaraderie of your team, and, you know, in a lot of cases, your city or your state. And the thing for me that, you know, obviously it's all kind of bled from that first moment, but if you think now the kind of the fan identities that are created around those teams, and not just those teams' logos per se, but kind of the personas that go with those teams. You think of like Raider Nation now, or the Cheeseheads in Green Bay. It's that kind of tribal spirit that they've created, and they've given themselves an identity from, you know, just from the logos on their helmets or the color schemes of their jerseys. So I think that for me is what has made it so great, is that kind of fan spectacle that has been created from those, you know, from what was in the beginning, simple logos, simple colors. And then you've now got color rush jerseys. You've got fans dressed up at every game in all manner of different outfits, and the Raiders are a great spectacle of that, particularly. But yeah, I just think stuff like that goes alongside the excitement of the NFL. We're talking about Scott and his presentation of Red Zone, and I think you get some of that when they cut to particular games and you see those hordes of fans behind the goals, and just that the phenomenal identity that they create goes so much towards making the NFL great. I think as much as the players and the games themselves, it's the fans that, like any sport, really make the difference in a lot of cases.
It's not just adds, it amplifies to the experience for everything. And I think you're right to kind of call out the changes and the history that you can call back on. I think we as a group, like whether it's been 2, 3 or 4 of us, like when the Chargers have been in kind of their powder blue throwbacks, I think the general opinion from the group is always, these look brilliant. Why do they not play in these more often instead of that kind of darker blue they've got? Like how much of a positive reaction do you think you'd get from the fan base if you announced that? And I realize there's reasons they can't do this, but if they could, the Texans announced that their sort of throwbacks this year were going to be throwing back to those love your blue Houston Oilers kind of colors that you saw from like Warren Moon and players like that. That would be an incredible thing to watch. And you look at the changes there've been with the Eagles going from that kind of Kelly green, bright green to kind of the darker that they've got now. The Seahawks going from kind of blue and silver to kind of that dark blue and that neon green. And just, you look at it in what people have, you see it in how people grow up. And even with helmets, like we've talked a lot about when the Dolphins wear their throwbacks and they have the old Dolphins logo on it. And again, how much better or how much more that feels like the Dolphins team. The NFL remembers its history and it does recognize it. And you see it in the stands, you see it on the field, you see it in kind of everything they try and invoke.
I think for me, it's interesting, without any prior discussion, that 4 people who enjoy chatting each week and, ultimately making an NFL podcast for each other and ourselves as much as anything else, I think, in truth, have all picked very emotional touchstones. I think talking about emotion, we've mentioned Phil, is our, like a resident hoarder, collector of memorabilia. But how far am I behind? I have a box in my bedroom, probably as the crow flies, a couple of meters from where I sit now recording this. And it's a 1987 Neil Lomax jersey, a very simple cardinal red jersey with white numbers on the front and back. And I absolutely adore it. Those emotional touchstones of the game are so important. And whether it's those memories we've created together or those moments Scott Hanson gives us, or those first few seconds where we just become transfixed by what I still believe is the greatest sport on earth. I think what a wonderful gift the NFL is. For all of its faults, and there are many. Thank you, Carl Nassib, for hopefully correcting and changing some of those social aspects of the game, and hopefully changing social aspects that go beyond the game. But Guy, it gives memories and it gives experiences and feelings that last a lifetime. What an absolute joy. And gentlemen, I have no idea, as we record this, when I edit this later on, whether I will find this deeply nostalgic, deeply self-absorbed. I have no idea, but I've loved every second of it. And I hope that those listening will have their own moments, their own touchstones, their own things that they'll be thinking of. And not that I necessarily have ever felt the need to do this, but if you do, you know what, send them in. If you do, email them, find us on Twitter, do the things you'd need to do to let us know, because I think it's one of those things that unites so many true NFL fans in just an utterly beautiful way. But gentlemen, as always, thank you for your company. An absolutely super show. Phil, all is forgiven for Quiz of the Week. I loved it. I went Seahawks. Who am I to know? Who am I to know that it was Steelers Vikings? But gents, an absolute treat. Let's do it again in 7 days.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Rob.
4-4-4. come loose, fumbles. Now he runs with the ball inside the 5,